Hello and welcome to the virtual roundtable. Today we are discussing the smart mobility revolution. My name is Kevin Borras. I'm joined, as I was the first time, in episode 1, by Bob McQueen, smart mobility expert who was then based in Florida, now based in Perpignan in France. Bob, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kevin. And, I had trouble dealing with you during the last video session, so I brought reinforcements today.
Yes, I was going to say, I do feel slightly outnumbered, like a job interview, but it's fine. So we are also joined from Dubai. It's Ammar Safi from the Dubai Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure Development. And Ammar is an electrical engineer by trade, but a smart mobility expert as well. So Ammar, welcome to the event. How are you doing?
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone. And I would like to thank for this opportunity. And I hope it will be a useful roundtable for today for everyone who's hearing us.
Yes, I'm sure it will. And we're also joined by Michael Ellis. Michael is based in Vienna, and Michael is a content strategist with H3B Connected. Michael, thank you for your time as well.
Happy to be here.
You're not actually in San Francisco. We just point this out. That's just
right.
It's just virtual. He's virtually in San Francisco and actually in Vienna. Okay, so Bob and I have been discussing on a series of videos the idea of this body of knowledge, which is a book with audio and video content called The Smart Mobility Revolution. And we're doing a sort of a chapter by chapter 5-minute video where we're discussing the elements that make up smart mobility, why it's a revolution, why it's needed, who the major players are. The first thing we discussed in episode 1 was, what is smart mobility? I think we've probably discussed that enough in episode 1 about virtual roundtables, and people know what smart mobility is. But in terms of vision, I think it's really interesting to discuss what different countries and different authorities have as a vision for smart mobility. It means different things in different countries, let alone different continents. And what we've discussed before is that in Europe, perhaps Europe is slightly more obsessed with, if you like, maybe not a great word to use, thinking and planning, where America is much more likely to take action. Do you think the UAE, it's obviously for Ammar, the UAE and the Middle East has probably got it right in terms of you kind of have the best of both worlds, because the money that's been spent on smart mobility projects and smart cities in the UAE is extraordinary, but it's not just about the money, it's about actually using it properly and putting it for good use, and with the citizens at the heart of the project, citizen-centric mobility. So Ammar, am I right? Has the UAE specifically got it right in terms of how to have a vision, how to create the vision, and then how to implement it?
Yeah, that's right, actually. In UAE, actually, the leaders of UAE always put the initiatives and the vision for increasing the ranking of UAE and leading the UAE country to be one of the best countries all over the world. So based on that, we are using the, let's say, the two models, the US models and European models. The European models in terms of putting the visions and target and how we can achieve the target. And directly after that, we start implementing this plan and start executing it by a lot of projects and putting milestones to deliver it on time and using the approach of United States. However, in terms of, I would like to add one thing in terms of planning. Now, as a Minister of Infrastructure, Energy and Infrastructure, we are going to do the National Master Planning for Transport. This thing to be a master plan for 2050. From today till 2050, with the interval of 5 years projects and five years milestones for delivery, including the policies, legislations, and also the land use with the smart mobility integrations. This is as a Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure. Moreover, if you see the hierarchy and the structure of the cabinet of UAE, you find a lot of new ministries as a terminologies like Minister of Artificial Intelligence, Minister of Happiness. These things, it's not appear in other countries. So the leaders, I think they are very well known what they need, and how they can lead the country to reach this target.
Yeah, I love the idea of the fact you have a Minister of Happiness. What a great job. I think it'd be a fantastic job. If you go from defence to health in a cabinet reshuffle, everyone would want to be the Minister for Happiness. I think that's fantastic. So, Bob, is that a bit harsh? Maybe I'm just sort of playing devil's advocate, really. But the idea that Europe perhaps tends to overthink and overplan and be a bit too safe sometimes in the case of implementing infrastructure changes and mobility changes.
Well,
and America is more of an action-oriented culture.
Well, as a European who spent 20 or 30 years in the US, I've got kind of perspective on both sides. And, I'll exaggerate for effect. I can be even more harsher than you. An American looking at the European program would probably think analysis paralysis. And a European looking at the American program would think premature implementation. So they're somewhere in the middle. There's also an advantage in not being first. They have a saying on Silicon Valley which says the early bird catches the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. So sometimes it's good not to be the first mouse.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll think about that. I'm just grappling with the concept of the animals. But the other word that crops up all the time when we're talking about smart mobility and smart cities, and particularly revolutions of transport modes, is the word agility, in terms of how systems can be agile, software can be agile, hardware, but it's come down to sort of cultural thinking, and governmental policy is also agile. How important is it for governments, cities or national governments to be open-minded when it comes to the smart mobility changes? Because it's the last year, I think cities and authorities all around the world have been far more open to change because they've pretty much had to be.
Well, let me take the first crack at that. I'm in favor of something called stagility, which is a combination of stability and agility. I think agility is very important and will become increasingly important because things are moving more quickly. So we do need to be agile, but on the other hand, we also want to be stable. We don't want to be lurching from one extreme to the other. There needs to be some damping on the agility. But the way we are today, we definitely need a lurch towards agility. We definitely need to be able to respond to changes in the demand for transportation and changes in the operating condition.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I want to bring in Michael in a second. I'm going to leave Michael out of this. But in terms of, we're talking about successful implementations of smart mobility schemes around the world. In terms of the UAE, Ammar, what is success? What does that actually mean? What does it look like?
Actually, it's an important question. Regarding to the success for UAE in terms of smart mobility, we divide the smart mobility to different, let's say, missions and different sectors. For example, smart mobility should be obtain the high satisfaction rate for the people and for the users, for the public users. Number two, guarantee the economy cycle and enhance and develop the economy in the country. Guarantee that the health and the, let's say, the indirect health reasons it's happened because of the traffic jam and, let's say, the back pain and all those stuff, to be decreased. In the same time, guarantee that it's, the transportation or the mobility, it's like a backbone for the country. If you guarantee the integration between the maritime, land, and aviation, also this is one of the most important things, the connectivity between the countries. This is actually the sectors that we are looking for to achieve the highest percentage or reach the target for us. And this is what we call the successful. If we can reach this targets, yes, this is the successful for us.
Okay. So Michael, your job is content strategy. So at the end of that strategy, success is what you're looking for. So how do you see what success will be in terms of content strategy for the smart mobility sector?
Well, we talked about agility. Ammar has talked a lot about setting goals publicly, and I think communicating them to the public in a way in the UAE, which you don't see as actively in other countries. And I think what we're talking about here has to do with the nature of the technology that we want to bring into the world, which is fundamentally about interactivity. I mean, people ask about what is the definition of a smart city. It's one that's constantly improving itself by design. It's been designed to be interactive. So when it comes to content, this is actually one of the easiest places, I think, to kind of implement that principle. And success is when you've got a program from the beginning that communicates to people that you're actually there to be interacted with in the first place. I mean, you've got a lot of companies now in the private sector doing that, especially it's the consumer sector that leads the way in this. But more and more, I think B2B companies and governments, need to be on top of this idea of being present for people as just like that they could interact with them in the first place. And then secondly, as a project moves on, it's your ability to react and take in the feedback that you're getting from people that kind of makes you unique, and it gives them a sense that, hey, there is something different here, and your communication then is actually mirroring, hopefully, ultimately, what a smart mobility program might look like, where you're interacting with people not only on social media, but also on their apps, for example. Mm-hmm. You might incentivize certain behavior in an interactive manner through, electronic payments, for example. So yeah, I mean, really instilling that principle of interactivity from the beginning and doing it with your communications program, I think is essential when we talk about smart mobility.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned feedback, because we're going to talk about the role of social media in expressing to the public or to the users of public transport and smart mobility systems the benefits that they're getting from a change in behavior. We do live in a society, it's maybe not true everywhere, of what's in it for me. And people don't want to give up their car or give up doing something they like doing unless they're rewarded for it. What do I get okay, I won't drive to work 3 days in a row. What do I get? Do I get a free coffee, or what do I get out of it? People want something as a result of changing. So what role do you think social media has, especially at the moment where we're talking about the big social media companies like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, involved in a lot of negative publicity with online abuse, with sports stars and film stars for extraordinary, ridiculous reasons? But do you think social media companies can even use this kind of thing as a source of good news for their own platforms as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, social media is a technology, of course, and I think maybe it's a commonplace to say that technology is not good or bad in itself. It's how you use it. But I really do believe that, and it is true that in certain cultural contexts, people are looking more for what's in it for me. But actually, I think there are other desires, forces at play here, and in particular, I think the question of community is paramount. Mm-hmm. And what is a smart city, right? If not a community of the future? What is smart mobility, if not a more advanced way for us to connect with each other and get around? Yeah. So I do think that you can use social media in order to catalyze that sense of community. And believe it or not, I think people can geek out and can participate actively in various infrastructure projects because you're present on social media and pointing out how cool it is, whether it's something maybe relatively mundane but impacts people on an everyday basis, like new train line, or it's something flashy like urban air mobility. There's many possibilities, but I think the idea of creation of community is key.
Bob, I'm going to come to you then, because obviously we've been involved in the ITS sector specifically for a fair amount of time, and there's been some quite high profile schemes and projects that have fallen foul of the public's disapproval, if you like. And largely that's because they weren't really given the idea of the benefit. They just saw it as a change they didn't want. So how do you think cities and countries can actually get around this? And I'll come to Ammar and see how the UAE did it. But it's an issue that social media can solve, do you think?
Well, I think London got it absolutely and brilliantly correct with congestion pricing, because they separated out the legislation from the implementation. They actually did the legislation several years before implementation, which meant that the thing could be discussed in a kind of cool-headed way rather than being up against, like, we've got to take a decision to do this tomorrow. I also think it's significant, and I'm a little pessimistic here, that nothing big happens unless there's a crisis. For example, something called White Friday happened in London when an afternoon snowstorm coincided with the peak hour. It ground half of London to a halt, and then congestion pricing was acceptable after that. So there's that. And then I also think social media is very important if we treat it as a two-way channel. I mean, I get the impression that a lot of people don't realize that when you're on social media, like Facebook, you're on stage. There's a lot of people watching you. You've got an audience. But you can also use the facility to understand your audience. As you know, Kevin, you're more of a comedian than a journalist. Good.
I'll take that.
good comedians test the audience first of all, right? To see what's going to make them laugh and what not, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a key part of it. I've been doing some work on analyzing Twitter feeds using context-specific keyword analysis. So we're trying to find out how well do people regard transportation service compared to insurance and compared to banks. And if you're a transportation person and your average rating is sinking below a bank or an insurance company, then maybe you're in trouble. So there's those kind of things. And we also learn you got to be real careful with context-specific keyword analysis, because when somebody in California says it's wicked, it doesn't mean it's evil. It doesn't mean it's bad. Quite the reverse.
Or where I live, sick means good in the this part of London. If something is sick, it's really good. And other people think, what do you mean sick in a bad way? No, it's sick. I'm 52. I don't use that language, but I'm surrounded by it. You just hear it all the time. You just have to adapt your thinking. So it's a good point. Yeah.
And a surfing dude would call it gnarly.
Yeah,
which also means good.
Yeah, I would only use gnarly if it is involving wood. But anyway, there's another thing. So Ammar, I'm going to come to you. Ammar, I'm going to point about how Dubai is approaching this. But one thing I was going to mention about social media. There's a technology that's been developed for some time. It's being used for the taxi industry. One particular taxi company I won't name is looking at doing this. Is that for the next football season, starting in August, when hopefully fans can go again, they're looking at buying in an app in which there's very clever. They monitor the social media outpourings, if you like, of fans from one particular club coming to. They're based in a town in England, of football fans coming to that ground, their local ground, and they're monitoring Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp for words such as congestion. How do I get there? Taxi, train, walk, whatever. And they're monitoring, and they'll be sending more taxis to the local railway station to pick up these football fans at a discounted rate. It's a great idea, but it's purely it's crowdsourcing. It's crowdsourced information. But do you think, Ammar, is that something that Dubai looked into in terms of looking at how to get transport modes to the people rather than having to find it?
Yes, regarding to the social media, actually, or the I will tell you something. Nowadays, the bloggers and the influence on the social media platform, they have the word. Most of the people are listening to them, and maybe they are leading the public. Okay, they are big power. So I think Dubai, okay, start doing this, and also UAE government that using those influence people, okay, to use it as a marketing campaign and to increase the awareness of, let's say, environment, increasing the awareness to use more the public transportation, enhance the people to be using the other mobility services, to use mobility as a service itself. Okay, before, let's say, the mentality here, it was using the cars. Okay, the number of cars in each house, there is 2 to 3 cars. Nowadays, okay, people start using the in the neighborhood, okay, start using the, let's say, the soft mobility, or they start using the public transportation. Those things happened after using the let's say, after using the influence of the social media and the people there, like big names. For example, one time they brought Steve Harvey just to make marketing for the utilities of the UAE, and how it was integrated together. Yes, you can use the social media as a government. It's not only dedicated just only for private sector and to make revenue from it, but no, also to make a big awareness and marketing campaign from that.
Okay, thank you for that.
Kevin, I think it's important to do some simultaneous translation for our American viewers. When Kevin says football, he means soccer. And when Ammar says soft mobility, he means micro mobility.
True. That's good. We'll have subtitles for the next one. We'll spend some money. We'll get subtitles. It transfers into understandable.
When I get a chance to speak, then we can have English subtitles at the bottom.
Yes. Okay. So
what he really meant was.
Yes. You may also, right? So in terms of organizational capability, what methods do you use in the UAE to sort of to measure the capability of your departments to apply the new technologies that we're talking about?
Okay, in our structure, actually, in our strategic plan, we have to be agile, and we have to guarantee that our planning and the structure in the ministry, that it's delivering the efficiency and effectiveness with high rates, let's say. Okay, so based on that, we are making the planning and the structure for us. And I have to highlight one thing. During COVID, directly we shift to the online without any interruption. Directly, we are already had the, let's say, the platform of the education, the platform of the health, and the all government work, it's converted 100% to online. Now we start with the big data, we start with the projects for big data platform, and also we start with the from the e-government to digital government. Okay, so we start with the digital transformation methods now, the government. So just to be in the same line of the technologies, not to be behind of the technology, not to be behind of the world. Because nowadays we believe that one of the main factors that leading the whole, the globe, it's the digital platform and digital network. Today, for example, with the last change of the cabinets and ministerial cabinet, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, the ruler of Dubai, and he's the Prime Minister of UAE, he launched a new ministry for digital economy. Okay. Minister for Digital Economy, which is the looking for the opportunities of investing the digital in the digital infrastructure itself. So we believe that the structure should be agile and should be adopted for any changes due to the global.
Okay, good answer. Thank you, Michael. Where do you sit on a a strategic point of view with assessing how a company can be successful, or an organization, a city, an authority, or a national authority, or a town or village or whatever, that is looking at adopting smart mobility measures? How can they actually measure, use that word measure again, the potential success? Because there's always going to be something like a skills gap, isn't there? Where you might not have the people experienced enough to do the work. You may have an older generation, people of my age or Bob's age, that maybe are not agile enough in their thinking. And how do you address that gap?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think just first of all, having the mindset that, hey, there's a variety of different types of people here that we need to serve, and we need to be prepared to be in their world.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're not just serving a bunch of cookie cutter, you know, same person needs to get from A to B. It's really a shift in mindset from actually just like moving that person from one place to another, to thinking in terms of their experience. You know, what is the experience of getting from A to B?
Yeah.
Now that there are many ways to do that, and there are many new initiatives and technologies, what would a person who's, you know, a bit older and maybe just used to taking the train, for example, how are they going to react? And at the same time, how can you make yourself available or disseminate news and information regarding new services for a completely different demographic? So I would just say that basically, I mean, you know, it is a question of changing your approach to what it is you're actually delivering. And it kind of comes back to that question of, what does success look like in the first place? I would say, you know, basically we're at the juncture where, like in the programming world, it used to be, hey, we're going to plan out every single step from A to B to C to D to E to F to Z, and then we're going to implement. Now we need to go from A to B and say, okay, how was that? What was the experience like for each particular target group? And then iterate, and then go from B to C, etc. So I think it has to look like that. It's got to take on that agile mentality and involve, as we were saying before, some form of feedback mechanism from each of your constituent groups. That's how you kind of get closer and closer to success.
Okay, thank you. Right, Bob, we talked one of our videos about barriers to success, didn't we?
Yep.
So the body of knowledge that we're talking about, the smart mobility revolution, is being written by Bob and Ammar and his colleague Safi. So can I ask Bob first, what are the, if I say to you, what barriers are there to a successful implementation of a smart mobility scheme? What's the first 2 or 3 things that come to your mind immediately?
Okay, barrier number 1 is not defining success. Barrier number 2 is not agreeing your definition of success. And barrier number 3 is just lurching blindly into it without having any thought about objectives. Right now, defining success, I mean, I've just had a kind of grandmother moment here. My grandmother used to say to me, Bob, if something stupid's happening, there's 2 possible outcomes. Number 1, something stupid is happening, or number 2, you just don't understand it. Well, I have to admit, when Ammar first told me a while ago about the Ministry of Happiness, my immediate reaction was, that's stupid. But then I realized that I didn't say anything because of my grandmother's advice. I thought about it, and I didn't understand it, because in fact, my definitions of success for smart mobility are increased safety, improved mobility or efficiency, enhance customer service, and protect the environment. And I'm thinking, somebody's done some brilliant thinking in the United Arab Emirates, because they figured out that all these things lead to one thing: happiness.
Yep.
So you know, I think it's great, and I'm going to add that to the top of my list. That number 1, we need to be happy. The other reason I like it is that I had a chat with Jeff Paniati at the American Society of Civil Engineers, and he said there's not a lot of focus on people in smart cities. there's a lot of focus on technologies and solutions. So
Mhm.
I like the happiness and well-being part because it puts a focus back on people as well, which I think is very important.
Well, if you look at the list of the happiest places on earth, or the cities people love living in, I reckon you probably find that all of them have got very, very good public transport schemes, at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
And by the way, I need to
yeah.
make a correction, Kevin. Jeff is not with who I said he was. He's with the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So
Oh, he
sorry
is,
about
isn't
that,
he?
Jeff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jeff. We'll apologise for that. Maybe we know something he
Sorry.
doesn't.
Yeah, sorry for calling you a civil engineer, Jeff.
Yeah. No, you wouldn't like that. Sorry to all civil engineers. It's I'm not.
Hey, I'm a civil engineer. Come on. that's
I know
enough.
you are. No, it wasn't an insult on anyone's part. It's just we've misunderestimated something.
You could find a
Yes.
load of concrete on your desk tomorrow, Kevin.
It's very true. Or a cow dropped on me from a large distance.
No, that wouldn't be civil. Yeah.
That's true. Uncivil engineering. I quite like the idea of that.
That's the end of part 1 of the Smart Mobility Revolution virtual roundtable discussion. Join us in part 2 shortly.